Westerns aren't dead. They're just buried under piles of blockbusters and superhero capes. But let's be real. Not every dusty cowboy flick deserves to ride again. Still, a handful of overlooked gems have grit, power, and storytelling that hit harder now than when they came out. So, what forgotten frontier tales still pack a punch? Saddle up, because the trail we're about to ride isn't the one you expect. Ride Lonesome, 1959. If you want to understand why director Bud Budisher is whispered about with cult-like respect, Ride Lonesome is your initiation. On paper, it's simple. Randolph Scott plays a bounty hunter escorting a killer across dangerous territory. But simplicity is deceptive here. Every step of their journey reveals layers of moral tension, betrayals, and uneasy alliances. It's a tightrope act between frontier justice and personal redemption. Budisher had this gift. He stripped westerns down to their rawest essentials. No grand spectacle, no sweeping cavalry charges, just men circling each other like wolves. And Randolph Scott? He was at the twilight of his career, but gave performances that felt like he'd finally aged into the roles he was born to play. There's a weary dignity to his character that makes every line sting with truth. Then there's Lee Van Cleef, who before his spaghetti western fame was honing that icy stare right here. You can practically see the DNA of Sergio Leone's classics forming in these small, rugged B-pictures. Ride Lonesome isn't forgotten because it was bad. It's forgotten because it was too lean, too unpolished for the Hollywood machine. Yet that sparseness is exactly why it still cuts deep today. A film this lean feels modern, even urgent. The Hanging Tree, 1959. Gary Cooper usually played the noble hero, the reliable man with a code. But in The Hanging Tree, the mask cracks. He's not the heroic sheriff. He's a frontier doctor with a past that might be darker than the villains around him. Set during Montana's gold rush, the film wastes no time showing the chaos and greed that fueled those boomtowns. Cooper's character heals wounds, yes, but he also manipulates and controls. This shift was shocking for audiences used to seeing him as Hollywood's straight-arrow good guy. And that's the beauty of it. The Hanging Tree plays like a slow-burning mystery. Every time you think you've got Cooper's character figured out, the story twists the knife. Carl Malden and Ben Piazza bring fire as supporting players, but it's Cooper's gray morality that haunts the movie. Behind the camera, Delmer Daves knew how to paint the West as both majestic and merciless. His Montana isn't golden sunsets and cheerful saloons. It's mud, blood, and suspicion. The film ends with a mix of redemption and unease that leaves you unsettled, which is exactly why it still works. Forgotten by many, but once you've seen it, you can't shake it. The Last Wagon, 1956. Richard Widmark didn't exactly look like your classic cowboy hero, and that's what made him perfect for The Last Wagon. He plays Comanche Todd, a man with native blood accused of murdering white settlers. The irony? He's the only one who can lead a group of stranded pioneers through hostile territory after an Apache raid wipes out their wagon train. It's part survival thriller, part morality play. What makes the film hold up is how it shatters stereotypes. Instead of a faceless Indian threat, Todd is a layered character, both feared and needed. Widmark walks that razor's edge between menace and protector, giving a performance that makes you question the usual Western binaries of civilized and savage. That was gutsy stuff for the 1950s. The landscapes are brutal, the action sequences raw, and the tension never lets up. Director Delmer Daves leaned into moral ambiguity in his westerns, and this one might be his sharpest. Audiences at the time weren't sure what to make of it. It didn't fit the John Wayne mold. But today, that refusal to play nice makes it stand out. This isn't a dusty relic, it's a survival thriller with teeth, and it deserves more than a footnote. Day of the Outlaw, 1959. Snow in a Western? Yes. And Day of the Outlaw proves it's not just a gimmick. Robert Ryan plays a tough rancher whose bitter feud with neighbors is interrupted by a gang of ruthless outlaws led by Burl Ives. Suddenly, the icy plains become a trap where every step feels like it could be your last. Forget the sun-bleached desert. This is the Western as survival horror. The snowbound setting isn't just atmospheric. It forces the story into a pressure cooker. You can feel the chill in every frame. The outlaws don't swagger into town. They slither, coiled and unpredictable, until the entire community trembles under their control. Robert Ryan's simmering intensity collides with Burl Ives's unsettling authority, and the result is claustrophobic brilliance. Director Andre de Toth, known for House of Wax, proved here he could wring terror out of silence and emptiness. Critics at the time didn't know what to do with a Western this bleak, but modern viewers recognize it for what it is, a precursor to later snow Westerns like The Hateful Eight. It's not flashy, but its icy grip doesn't let go. If Westerns are usually about heat and dust, Day of the Outlaw flips the script with a blizzard of dread. No Name on the Bullet, 1959. What if the scariest man in town never fired a shot? That's the premise of No Name on the Bullet, starring Audie Murphy in his most unexpected role. Usually typecast as the boyish war hero, Murphy here is a hired gun whose reputation alone destabilizes an entire community. He barely has to lift a finger. Paranoia does the killing for him. This is a Western built on psychology, not shootouts. The moment Murphy's character rides in, people start suspecting each other, turning neighbor against neighbor. It's less about bullets and more about fear. And Murphy? He plays it with a cold detachment that makes you forget he was once America's most decorated World War II soldier. This isn't hero worship. It's icy calculation. Director Jack Arnold, better known for science fiction like Creature from the Black Lagoon, brought that same sense of creeping dread here. He knew how to twist atmosphere until it suffocated you. The film slipped under the radar because it didn't deliver the bang-bang theatrics audiences expected. But that restraint is what makes it timeless. Strip away the cowboy hats, and it could almost play like a modern noir thriller. The Big Country, 1958. Forget the quick-draw duels and barroom brawls. The Big Country is about ego, pride, and the land itself, and it plays on a scale that dwarfs most Westerns. Gregory Peck stars as James McKay, an Eastern gentleman who rides into the West not with a six-shooter, but with stubborn conviction. What follows isn't your typical cowboy showdown, but a clash of values, individual honor versus inherited violence. William Wyler directed this sprawling epic with a painter's eye. The widescreen landscapes swallow the characters whole, reminding you that man's dramas are tiny compared to the vast frontier. Peck deliberately underplays his role, letting Charlton Heston's brash ranch foreman chew the scenery. But that's the point. McKay proves his strength not by outdrawing anyone, but by refusing to play the macho games of the West. At the time, some audiences didn't get it. They wanted gunfights. They got philosophy. But looking back, The Big Country feels radical. A Western where the quiet man is the true giant, where the refusal to kill is a greater show of courage than the fastest draw. And Jerome Moras's thunderous score. It still slaps harder than most action movie themes today. This one holds up not because it shouts, but because it dares to whisper. Blood on the Moon. 1948. Call it the first true Western noir. Blood on the Moon takes dusty cattle ranches and bathes them in shadow and suspicion. Robert Mitchum stars as Jim Gary, a drifter caught between old loyalties and a bloody range war. And Mitchum, with that sleepy-eyed menace, was born for a role like this. Unlike the bright Technicolor spectacles, this film is shot like a crime thriller. Cinematographer Nicholas Musaraka, who worked on Cat People and Out of the Past, drenches the West in shadowy compositions. Nighttime shootouts, dim interiors, rain-soaked standoffs. This is a Western that looks like it wandered out of a Raymond Chandler novel. The story itself is pure double-cross territory. Gary is manipulated into siding with cattle rustlers before realizing he's a pawn in a bigger game. Mitchum plays the moral awakening with grit, and Barbara Bel Geddes adds depth as a rancher's daughter who sees through the lies. Audiences in 1948 weren't ready for this kind of hybrid. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't pretty, and it didn't tie up neatly. But that's exactly why it holds up today. Blood on the Moon feels like a Western with the soul of a detective story, proving that genre boundaries could be blurred long before Hollywood made it trendy. Pursued, 1947. If Blood on the Moon hinted at noir in the West, Pursued went all in. This is the granddaddy of the psychological Western, a story about memory, fate, and family curses wrapped in six-shooters and dust storms. Robert Mitchum, again at his moody best, plays Jeb Rand, a man haunted, literally, by flashbacks of a childhood massacre. He doesn't know the full story, but the truth is tied to the people closest to him. Directed by Raoul Walsh, Pursued plays less like a shoot-'em-up and more like a Greek tragedy under a Western sky. Cinematographer James Wong Howe, one of the greatest to ever touch a camera, fills the screen with deep shadows, stark contrasts, and imagery that feels ripped from a nightmare. It's heavy stuff. Jeb is torn between love and revenge, with his entire life shaped by forces he can't escape. The film asks whether violence is inherited, whether a man can outrun destiny, or if the past always catches up with you. For a 1947 audience expecting heroic cowboys, it was downright unsettling. Today, though, it feels ahead of its time, an art house Western before the term even existed. If you like your frontier tales with psychological weight, Pursued proves forgotten doesn't mean disposable. It means misunderstood. The Tall T, 1957. Nobody did more with less than Bud Bodeker, and The Tall T might be his leanest, meanest masterpiece. Once again, Randolph Scott is our stoic cowboy, this time ambushed by outlaws after a stagecoach robbery goes south. The setup is stripped to the bone, a handful of characters, a barren landscape, and a ticking clock. But in that sparseness lies raw tension. Richard Boone nearly steals the show as the outlaw leader, a man too intelligent for his own good. His performance is magnetic, charming one moment, terrifying the next. The back and forth between Scott's quiet resilience and Boone's calculating menace gives the film a pulse that never slows. Bodeker understood something studios didn't. Westerns didn't need to be big to be powerful. They just needed truth. Shot mostly in the Alabama hills of California, the movie feels like it was baked in desert heat. The silences between lines stretch like gun barrels, and every look carries the weight of unspoken threats. Forgotten because it didn't have spectacle. The Tall T survives because it didn't need any. It's pure distilled Western, tense, intimate, and sharp as barbed wire. Canyon Passage, 1946. Before Westerns settled into their desert dust aesthetic, Canyon Passage painted the frontier in bold technicolor. Set in Oregon, it follows Logan Stewart, played by Dana Andrews, a trader navigating love triangles, gambling debts, and violent frontier justice. What sounds like soap opera melodrama on paper comes alive as a surprisingly layered community drama. Jacques Tourneur, the same director behind Cat People and Out of the Past, brought his atmospheric touch to the wide-open frontier. He blends domestic life with sudden, shocking violence, making Canyon Passage a strange but compelling mix of romance, community portrait, and brutal justice. What really makes it stand out are the side characters. Hoagie Carmichael shows up with songs that frame the narrative like folktales, while Brian Donlevy simmers as a reckless gambler who drags everyone down with him. The Oregon landscapes are lush, green, and totally different from the arid Southwest we usually associate with Westerns. At the time, it confused audiences. It wasn't quite action, not quite romance, and not quite noir. But in hindsight, that genre blending makes it fascinating. Canyon Passage proves the West wasn't just one thing. It was messy, contradictory, and unpredictable. That's why this forgotten gem still holds up. 7 Men from Now. 1956. The title sounds like Pulp Fiction, but 7 Men from Now is one of the most elegant revenge tales the Western ever produced. Randolph Scott, once again, rides with quiet authority, this time as a former sheriff tracking down the 7 men who murdered his wife. No sprawling subplots, no wasted motion, just a man on a single-minded mission that burns hotter with each mile. Directed by Bud Bodeker and written by Burt Kennedy, this film kicked off their legendary collaboration. Kennedy's script is razor-sharp, dripping with irony and tension, while Bowdisher frames the story with a painter's eye for emptiness and silence. It's not about endless shootouts, but the inevitability of confrontation, the way justice and revenge blur until you can't tell them apart. Lee Marvin turns up in one of his best early roles, playing a charming but deadly outlaw who constantly needles Scott's stoic hero. Their verbal duels are just as sharp as their gunplay, and the sense of looming violence makes every scene electric. At the time, it was considered a B-Western, too modest to sit alongside studio epics. But that's exactly why it works today. It strips away the bloat and gets to the marrow of the genre. 7 Men from Now is not forgotten because it was weak, it's forgotten because it was too honest. And honesty doesn't age. 40 Guns, 1957. If you think Westerns were just a boys' club, 40 Guns smashes that myth to pieces. Barbara Stanwyck, then in her 50s and already a Hollywood legend, commands the screen as Jessica Drummond, a ruthless ranch owner who controls her land with an army of 40 hired guns. Forget the damsel in distress. Stanwyck rides, shoots, and dominates in ways that made John Wayne look almost tame. Directed by Samuel Fuller, a filmmaker never afraid to push buttons. The movie is pure visual bravado. CinemaScope lenses stretch the Arizona plains into surreal panoramas, while Stanwyck leads thunderous cavalry charges in one of the most jaw-dropping sequences of the era. Fuller had a flair for subversion, and here he toys with gender dynamics, morality, and even Hollywood's own cliches. The film's energy is relentless. 1 minute it's operatic romance, the next it's blistering gunfire, and then it pivots into raw violence. Critics at the time weren't sure what to make of it. Was it melodrama or satire, art film or exploitation? The answer is all of the above. Today, 40 Guns feels radical. Stanwyck's performance has bite, Fuller's direction has swagger, and the whole thing moves with a reckless energy that still feels fresh. Forgotten? Maybe. But overlooked powerhouses like this prove the Western wasn't just about stoic men with six-shooters. It could be wild, stylish, and fearless too. The Gunfighter, 1950. Gregory Peck was never better than in The Gunfighter, a film that takes the myth of the quick-draw hero and drags it into the dirt. He plays Jimmy Ringo, a notorious gunslinger whose reputation makes him both feared and doomed. Ringo isn't looking for glory. He just wants peace, maybe even a chance to reconcile with his wife and son. But his past follows him like a shadow, and every young gun in town wants to make their name by killing him. What makes the film sting is its realism. There are no sweeping chases or endless battles, just the crushing weight of notoriety. Ringo spends most of the movie holed up in a saloon, waiting for the next challenger, waiting for forgiveness, waiting for the inevitable. Peck plays him with a quiet desperation that cuts through the myth of the heroic outlaw and exposes the loneliness underneath. Henry King's direction is intimate, almost theatrical, letting silence and stares do more damage than bullets. And the screenplay by William Bowers was so sharp it ended up inspiring countless imitations, from High Noon to Unforgiven. Forgotten only because it was overshadowed by louder westerns, The Gunfighter holds up precisely because it resists glamour. It's a cautionary tale dressed as a western, and its truth hits harder today than it did in 1950. Rancho Notorious, 1952. If you thought Fritz Lang only directed film noir and German expressionist classics, think again. Rancho Notorious is his flamboyant detour into the western, and it's as strange and hypnotic as you'd expect. Marlene Dietrich stars as Alter Keene, a saloon singer turned outlaw queen who runs a ranch where criminals can hide for a price. When a young man infiltrates her gang to avenge his fiancée's murder, the stage is set for betrayal, lust, and bloody revenge. Lang wasn't interested in cliches. He turned the film into a fever dream of color, music, and menace. Songs punctuate the story like a Greek chorus, foreshadowing doom in deceptively cheerful tones. Dietrich, draped in costumes that feel almost theatrical, dominates every frame with her icy charisma. It's not a conventional Western. It's too stylized, too theatrical. But that's what makes it unforgettable. It's noir by way of the prairie, filled with fatalism and a sense of destiny closing in. At the time, audiences were baffled. They wanted John Wayne grit. They got a Technicolor opera. But in hindsight, Rancho Notorious is daring cinema. The kind of Western that proves the genre could bend without breaking. Today, it plays like an art piece, hiding inside a revenge thriller. If you want a Western that feels like no other, this is the one. The Furies. 1950. Power, Inheritance, and Betrayal. The Furies takes Western tropes and injects them with the venom of Greek tragedy. Barbara Stanwyck, once again proving she could outact any cowboy in Hollywood, stars as Vance Jeffords, the daughter of a ruthless cattle baron, played by Walter Houston. Their relationship isn't just tense, it's a battle for dominance, each determined to control the sprawling ranch known as the Furies. Director Anthony Mann, who later made some of the greatest psychological westerns with James Stewart, here crafted a story of ambition and blood that feels Shakespearean in scale. Cinematographer Victor Milner captures the New Mexico landscapes with painterly elegance. But the real fireworks come from the performances. Stanwyck plays Vance as fierce, passionate, and deeply flawed, a woman trying to wrestle power in a world designed to crush her. Houston, in his final film role, roars with larger-than-life authority. Their confrontations are volcanic, and the supporting cast only adds fuel to the fire. It's not a typical Western. There are cattle raids and gunfights, sure, but at its heart, it's a family drama about obsession and legacy. Overshadowed by flashier films of the decade, The Furies got buried under the myth of traditional Westerns. But watch it now, and it feels richer, darker, and bolder than many of the so-called classics. So there you have it, 15 Westerns that time tried to bury, but that still kick hard when you dust them off. They aren't just forgotten, they're proof the genre was braver, stranger, and sharper than people give it credit for. Which of these deserves a modern audience the most? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that subscribe button if you love cinematic deep cuts, and share this with anyone who thinks Westerns are dead. The frontier isn't gone. It's just waiting to be rediscovered.